I make psychology dope. Mental muscle. Yeah. Hey. I'm spitting this medicine right out my mandible. Sip it, it's good for you. Better than Theraflu, even though I enlighten populations don't they.
Yeah.
Is everything okay? We heard an awful ruckus.
No, everything's fine here. Yeah, it's great.
So you're fine?
Yeah, couldn't be better.
Oh, nice. You guys are
Susie,
fine?
Martin,
Have a nice night.
officers.
Looks like you're redecorating. It's right.
Yo, what is up, y'all? This is going to be a really interesting video today. I'm going to be breaking down the neuroscience and the psychology of really good sex. Now, I know the title says good sex, but we're going to talk about really good sex because that basic shit can miss me, bruh. But you know who else said that basic shit can miss them in the world of sex? Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That movie that came out in 2005 with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. They were essentially playing two assassins who are also married, and both of them were given the instructions to kill each other. But instead of killing each other, they decided to do what has now become the topic of this video. They beat them ribs up. They friggy diggy, and they made it sneaky. So anyway, the thing we want to know is, what are the identifiable components, both internally and externally, that fosters this event, that facilitates really good sex? When you identify as someone who has great sex or not, you'll definitely get something out of this video, regardless of if you do or you don't. You're gonna find something out of this video for sure, and you'll also find it hella entertaining, so stick around. Now, I'm going to break down this video into three parts. Number one, going to define really good sex for the purpose of our discussion. Next, elaborate on the neurological and psychological components of really good sex. And then thirdly, the iconic scene. We're going to take a look at what is, in my opinion, one of the most iconic 2-minute movie scenes of the last 20 years, when Mr. and Mrs. Smith wanted that smoke. And even though they were assassins in that video, they didn't want the kind of smoke that kills somebody. They wanted the kind of smoke that gives people life. The kind that'll make you do happy people shit, you know, like smile at strangers or have a butterfly land on your nose when you go outside and then write about it in your journal, like shit like that. And disclaimer, this movie scene was a tastefully done showing of monkey fun. It doesn't show anything out of pocket, so don't report my video, dog. Thank you. Now, what are the psychosocial, neurological, emotional, and physical factors that occur right before and during sex that ultimately make it really good? Well, when it comes to the way that people perceive good sex, there's definitely multiple groups, right? There are those people who find it to be an oversimplified thing where they're just like, yeah, it's about what's happening physically, it's about the biology, and that's it. Then there are the people who have an awareness of the complexity of sex, and they tend to be the most open-minded, the best sexual partners, or at least have the most upward potential as it relates to their ability to become proficient at it. Then there are the people who think they've got it all in the bag, and they're the king or queen of the bedroom. But they just don't know what they don't know, you know what I'm saying? There's the dudes who think they know everything and try to give their homies advice, but actually, they've theorized all of that bullshit in their heads. They've had such few sexual experiences that they just haven't met the girl that'll assassinate their ego and put their ass on blast in the group chat. Then there are the women who think they could be world champion in mechanical bull riding or eating a banana in one gulp. But the men they've been with just haven't told them they're average at best, because it won't only hinder their ability to slide on her again, but they'll probably get their ass slapped. Needless to say, this is a topic that deserves some scholarly and entertaining discussion, so let's dive in. If we're going to talk about the components of good sex, we have to identify what good sex is. While the experience and the interpretation of that obviously varies for everyone, I'll be using the following as the definition for this video. Good sex is defined by physical stimulation or touch used effectively over time to bring about a feeling of satisfaction. Neurological factors or observable changes in the brain that manifest in the body. And lastly, a slew of mental and emotional factors that create an overall sense of euphoria and existential contentment. So number 1, physical stimulation. This one is straightforward conceptually, but when it comes to doing this one well, there are 3 constituent factors to consider. The anatomy of the body, what physical locations are being stimulated, the nature of the physical stimulation, and sexual climax or orgasm. So I think the majority of us are good on the anatomy part. I don't need to discuss physical location. And the next is the nature of the touch being delivered, the amount of pressure, the pattern of motion, etc. Once a satiating pattern or rhythm is established during the sexual experience, are they effectively keeping the rhythm and then smoothly transitioning into other satisfying movement patterns? Or is the rhythm being clumsily broken or interrupted, causing a disjointed experience for the recipient? The latter will likely end up in an unhappy and/or very unsatisfied sexual partner. One more thing about the nature of the physical stimuli, though. Optimally, the sex involves not just satisfying sensation, but a combination of sensory stimuli that can bring pleasure to multiple of your sensory channels at once. Of course, that can be achieved through stimulating multiple locations at once, such as for you ladies receiving clitoral stimulation in conjunction with G-spot stimulation simultaneously. But another example is the stimulating of channels from different senses at once, such as being intimate with someone who can maintain an effective thrust tempo while knowing how to stimulate you auditorily with words, knowing what to say and when to say it, in what tone, or knowing the kind of sounds that arouse you during intimacy can obviously intensify the overall experience. Now, for the last point on physical stimulation, profound intimate satisfaction often results in one of the most thoroughly enjoyed aspects of being human, an orgasm, also referred to as sexual climax. And it's important to specify that it can manifest into one or multiple orgasms, though technically orgasms may not always be present for a number of reasons when people are having really good sex. But I think most would agree with me in saying that if you're getting some good nookie, then a few of those happened. And if you've never heard the term nookie before, you're welcome. Orgasm is definitely the epitome of pleasure and is characterized by involuntary rhythmic muscle contractions in the pelvic muscles. It includes sharp peaks in cardiovascular arousal and feelings of release. It's tied to altered states of consciousness, as well as a shift in perception as it relates to the experience of time and space. And in the case of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it's fair to say that Mrs. Smith probably had a few of those, and Mr. Smith probably had one really big one. Mind you, this is a highly individualistic topic, so achieving and experiencing orgasm is different for everyone, especially as it relates to women. It's more complex from both a neuropsychological and obviously biological perspective. So the manifestation of orgasm or sexual climax does differ from person to person. So next, let's hit the neurological factors. Now we're at the fun stuff. What are the observable neurological changes that occur during intensely euphoric sexual experiences? I want to look at this from 2 perspectives. Firstly, what are the parts of the brain that are activated during these euphoric encounters? And then secondly, what parts of the brain are deactivated? That's going to guide our argument for what to employ to maximize the sexual experience. Starting off with the parts that are activated. There's greater activity in the traditional reward pathways of the brain. And there's also greater activity in the VTA, also known as the ventral tegmental area. Now, interestingly, this is the same part of the brain that's activated during the heroin rush of an addict. Now, this tells us something. It tells us that there's a huge correlation between the emotions and the neurochemicals being stimulated in really good sex. Think about how a heroin addict feels. The bliss, the euphoria, the satisfaction, the overwhelming feeling of completion and comfort, This is an emotional thing. This is an evolution of the emotional state that's occurring. And let's keep that in mind. Now let's talk about the parts of the brain that are deactivated. Among those are the frontal cortex, the amygdala, and the temporal lobe. The frontal cortex is involved in judgment and moral reason and ethics. All of those are being deactivated. They're going away, or at least being profoundly decreased. Then there's the amygdala. It's involved in fear and anxiety. So this means during moments of intense sexually euphoric experiences, the brain is deactivating the parts relating to fear, anxiety, ethics, and judgment. What does a person need to willingly relinquish all of their mechanisms? Think about that. To relinquish all of that, they need to feel safe. More specifically, a profound degree of psychological safety. I mean, really think about it. Anxiety, fear, and judgment are all survival mechanisms. So you need to feel psychologically safe with your partner and in the environment you're in for your brain to deactivate those functions. But in the context of really good sex, your brain deactivates the survival mechanisms to give you greater access to the feelings, perceptions, and sensations that are most associated with adventure. This is why really good sex has the tendency to gradually push the boundaries of how the two partners engage in sex. If the partners become long-term sexual partners and continue to keep the components in play that make their sex really good, then kinks and fetishes and sexual behaviors beyond their previous boundaries will likely unearth themselves, as the participation in great sex is synonymous with the pursuit of a multi-dimensional adventure. The certainty that each partner experiences through establishing psychological safety makes way for the psychological need during sex to flourish, the need for controlled yet fluid uncertainty. So the certainty makes way for the uncertainty, and the uncertainty creates a feeling of freedom and adventure. That's where it is. We're getting deep into the emotional and the psychological parts of this now. Now here's a perfect example of how the neurological and emotional processes influence the physical, and how the physical in turn influence the emotional and the neurological. During an intense sexual encounter, because the emotions are elevated by the excitement and anticipation created by uncertainty, while the subconscious mind is at ease because there's established psychological safety, your body releases a number of neurochemicals, the first of which is endorphins. Endorphins are like our body's natural painkillers, while also being built-in mood boosters, essentially. It's like our body's form of an opiate, and actually, it's what heroin and all other opiates resemble. So the emotional factors intensify the physical, creating the release of a neurological chemical. And that opiate, or that endorphin, then elevates the emotions, perceptions, and physical experience. It becomes a loop. And oh, it gets better. Oxytocin, another neurochemical, deeply fosters attachment, connection, and bonding. It's a chemical that can be stimulated by physical actions combined with emotion. Great example is the suckling of a woman's nipples, which research shows releases oxytocin, something we can thank evolution and motherhood for. You know how people talk about having been addicted to a sexual partner? Yeah. So all of this is Let's just stop and look at this one pattern of thought, okay? That during really good sex, thought is being largely deactivated, and that's being replaced by greater activation of parts of the brain responsible for sensory stimuli and feeling emotional stimuli more intensely. So if you look at sex as strictly physical, you've lost it. When it comes to how you touch during the encounter, the eye contact that you maintain, stimulating different locations of the body and arousing the body through appealing to multiple sensory channels, being intentional about how you stimulate the emotions of your partner, using the physical tools at your disposal, as well as the awareness that sex is an emotional experience to arouse them, initiates these neurological chemicals, these neurological factors that we can see are released in the brain and in the body of the individual when you're employing and utilizing all of these things effectively. That intentionality, understanding, not just the fact that this is an occurrence that you want to perform at, not being performative, but really being immersed into the nuances, into the multidimensional nature of it, and then ultimately letting that experience of evolve into this adventure, into this exploration that you're having with this other person. It's pretty dope. So that was the neuropsychology of really good sex. I hope you guys enjoyed the info. Please like, share, and spread the word. And before you leave, stay to the end. Peep game.
Don't! Come on! Come on!
You want it? It's yours.
Alright, man, y'all nasty. Y'all really was gonna sit here and watch this whole video. Y'all get up out of here. Mental Muscle Coach out. Love you though. Peace. Yeah. Hey. I'm spitting this medicine right out my mandible. Sip it, it's good for you. Better than Theraflu. Even though I enlighten populations, don't dare get it twisted. I'm sick like a